The voice on the recording was unmistakably his own, yet engineer Daniel Mercer had never spoken those words, a eulogy for himself, describing his own death in vivid detail. The black box recovered from Eastern Airlines Flight 217 should have contained only cockpit recordings from 1979. Instead, it broadcast a funeral that hadn't happened yet, his funeral. But the most disturbing part wasn't just hearing his voice describe his own demise. It was that every other voice on that recording belonged to someone who had died in the crash 45 years ago. My name is Catherine Shen, lead investigator with the Aviation Anomaly Assessment Division, a specialized branch of air accident investigation that examines cases defying conventional explanation. I've spent 23 years investigating aircraft incidents that fall outside standard parameters. What I'm about to share violates multiple confidentiality protocols, but the public deserves to know what happened when Daniel Mercer, a 54-year-old senior aviation forensic engineer with 17 years of experience, began the routine examination of a recovered flight recorder last month. The black box in question wasn't actually black. They never are. It was a standard orange cockpit voice recorder, cylindrical in shape, retrieved from the wreckage of Eastern Airlines Flight 217 that crashed in the Allegheny Mountains on December 12, 1979. The crash killed all 63 passengers and 5 crew members. While the incident had been officially attributed to pilot error during severe weather conditions, recent land development in the area had uncovered previously unrecovered wreckage, including the CVR that had been missing from the original investigation. This should have been a straightforward technical confirmation of the established cause. Instead, it opened what several members of our team have described as a temporal wound in our understanding of reality. The events began on April 14th of this year, when Daniel Mercer signed out the recovered CVR from evidence storage. As standard procedure, he photographed the unit's condition, noting significant corrosion and impact damage consistent with 4 decades of environmental exposure. The outer casing showed extensive deterioration, but the memory unit inside, a specialized tape designed to withstand extreme conditions, appeared remarkably intact. "I've seen worse," Mercer noted in his preliminary report. "The protective housing did its job. There's a good chance we can recover audio." What happened next defies rational explanation. According to laboratory security footage, Mercer followed standard protocols for connecting the damaged recorder to specialized playback equipment. At 14:27, he initiated the first playback attempt. The monitoring system registered signal acquisition, but instead of beginning playback, every electronic device in the laboratory experienced a momentary power fluctuation. The building's backup generators activated despite no registered main power failure. When playback resumed 11 seconds later, Mercer's expression changed dramatically. Security footage shows him removing his headphones with such force that he knocked over his coffee mug. He backed away from the workstation, visibly shaken. After 63 seconds, he approached the console again and terminated the playback. The official record indicates Mercer then called his supervisor, Dr. Eliza Weisberg, requesting immediate consultation. When she arrived 17 minutes later, Mercer was sitting in the corner of the lab, staring at the recorder. According to Dr. Weisberg's statement, his first words to her were, "That's impossible. I just heard myself dead." But the strangeness had only begun. When Dr. Weisberg suggested they listen together, Mercer initially refused. It took 20 minutes of discussion before he agreed to resume playback with proper documentation. This time, they initiated recording equipment to capture what they heard. What follows is a partial transcript of that session, which I've reviewed personally. Playback initiates with standard white noise, followed by an unusual harmonic oscillation not typical of CVR recordings. Gathered here today to remember Daniel Alexander Mercer, whose dedication to uncovering the truth never wavered, even when that truth defied explanation. I first met Dan 15 years ago at the Aberdeen conference. Even then, he was asking questions nobody else thought to ask. It was that curiosity that made him exceptional at his job. And ultimately,
It was that same curiosity that led him to discover what happened to Eastern Airlines Flight 217. He found us when no one was looking. He heard us when no one was listening. The black box contained more than just the final moments of our flight. It contained a bridge, a connection between worlds that should never have crossed. Dan realized too late what opening that door would mean. Is he with us now, Mommy? Yes, sweetheart. He crossed over.
They always do when they hear the recording. Daniel Mercer's voice. What happens in the mountains stays in the mountains, except when it doesn't, except when it follows you home, except when it waits for you in the dark of your bedroom, in that moment between wakefulness and sleep, when the boundaries are thinnest. According to Dr. Weisberg's report, Mercer was ashen and trembling after this session. He insisted that the voice they heard was unmistakably his own, despite not having any memory of recording such statements. More disturbingly, he claimed to recognize subtle speech patterns and verbal tics that were uniquely his. The way he cleared his throat before beginning a new thought, a slight stutter on certain consonants that had developed after a minor stroke 3 years prior. "That's me," he reportedly told Dr. Weisberg, "but I never said those words. I never recorded this."
This is a funeral that hasn't happened. The investigation might have ended there, written off as a bizarre technical glitch or elaborate hoax, if not for what happened next. Dr. Weisberg, following protocol for potentially compromised evidence, ordered full-spectrum analysis of the recording. When audio engineers compared the voices to known samples from the deceased crew, they found match rates exceeding 97% for Captain Sandra Levine and flight attendant Rebecca Torres. The match for Mercer's voice was 99.4%, higher than would typically be possible with even the most sophisticated voice simulation technology currently available. But more disturbing was the background analysis. Beneath the primary audio, sound engineers identified what they described as layered conversations occurring simultaneously, dozens of overlapping voices speaking in patterns inconsistent with normal conversation.
When these were isolated and enhanced, they appeared to be fragments of the original cockpit recordings from the flight's final moments, playing backward and at varying speeds. The most chilling discovery came 3 days later. While reviewing a particularly distorted section of audio, technicians isolated what appeared to be coordinates being recited repeatedly in Morse code beneath the other sounds. These coordinates matched exactly the location where Daniel Mercer's car would later be found abandoned 47 miles from his home. By this point, Mercer's behavior had grown increasingly erratic. Colleagues reported he was refusing to sleep, keeping all lights on in his home, and making disturbing statements about being followed by the dead. He requested emergency leave but continued his unauthorized investigation from home.
His personal laptop, recovered after his disappearance, showed he had been researching both the original crash victims and an obscure mathematical concept called temporal entanglement. 7 days after the initial playback, Mercer sent a single text message to Dr. Weisberg at 3:17 a.m. "They're waiting for me in the mountains. They've always been waiting." His vehicle was discovered later that day near an unmarked trailhead in the Allegheny Mountains, approximately 6 miles from the original crash site. Despite an extensive search involving cadaver dogs, helicopters, and thermal imaging, no trace of Daniel Mercer has been found. What happened to Mercer remains officially classified as an unsolved disappearance, but those of us involved in the investigation cannot ignore the synchronicities that defy conventional explanation. The date of his disappearance, April 21st, was referenced within the recording itself, audible only when the playback was reversed and slowed to 23% of normal speed. He joins us April 21st. The circle completes. 3 separate technological anomalies have further complicated our understanding of these events. First, the laboratory's power consumption during the initial playback registered negative values for 7.2 seconds, an electrical impossibility suggesting the system was briefly generating rather than consuming energy. Second, the original recorder showed measurable radioactive decay inconsistent with its materials, exhibiting a half-life pattern that our nuclear physicists have been unable to identify.
Finally, timestamp metadata from the recording equipment shows that certain segments of the audio appear to have been recorded before playback began. Dr. Raymond Keller, chief theoretical physicist consulted on this case, has proposed what he terms a causality inversion event, in which information from a future timeline has contaminated the present. While most of the scientific community would dismiss such concepts as pseudoscience, Dr. Keller points to several quantum mechanics principles that might, under extraordinary circumstances, permit such phenomena. We know that at the quantum level, cause and effect can become untethered from normal sequential relationships, Dr. Keller explained during our consultation. What we're potentially witnessing here is a macro-scale manifestation of quantum retrocausality, the future influencing the past. But theory does little to explain the human element of this case. What happened to Daniel Mercer, and why he was seemingly targeted by this phenomenon? This brings us to what may be the most disturbing connection of all.
3 weeks after Mercer's disappearance, while reviewing historical documentation related to the original investigation, our team discovered something that had been overlooked. Among the 63 passengers on Eastern Airlines Flight 217 was a 3-year-old boy traveling with his mother to visit grandparents for Christmas. That child's name, Daniel Alexander Mercer. Records confirmed this was indeed the same Daniel Mercer who would later become our forensic engineer. Except according to all official documentation, that child had died in the crash along with everyone else on board. There is no record explaining how he survived or why his death was recorded. His elderly father, now suffering from advanced dementia, could provide no coherent explanation when interviewed, repeatedly stating only that they gave him back wrong. Examination of Mercer's birth certificate, social security records, and early medical history shows no irregularities. He existed continuously from birth until his recent disappearance, with an uninterrupted documentary trail. Yet, according to the original flight manifests and death certificates from 1979, he also unquestionably died in that crash. How can a man investigate a crash he died in? How can he hear his own funeral before it happens? These questions have divided our investigation team, with multiple competing theories emerging. Some suggest Mercer's identity was somehow misattributed after the crash, that he wasn't actually on the flight but was mistakenly listed. Others propose more radical explanations involving classified experiments and consciousness transfer that were rumored to have taken place in that region during the 1970s. The most extreme theory, which I include not because I endorse it, but because it addresses the most data points, is that whatever entity returned after the crash was not in fact the original Daniel Mercer, but something else that occupied his identity for 45 years until being called back to its point of origin. Lending disturbing credence to this final theory is the content of a journal found in Mercer's home after his disappearance. The final entry, dated the night before he vanished, contains a passage that has haunted everyone who has read it. I've always had the same nightmare since childhood. I'm on a plane. There's turbulence. People are screaming. Then a moment of weightlessness as we fall from the sky. I never remember the impact, just the moment before, suspended in air, watching the mountains rush toward us. Then darkness. But after darkness, voices. So many voices, all talking at once, all trying to tell me something important, something about waiting, about patience, about a plan spanning decades. I think I've always been dead. I think we all died in those mountains in '79. But something kept us here, suspended between states, waiting for the circle to complete. The black box wasn't just recording our final moments. It was preserving us somehow. And now it's time to go back. They're calling me home. The investigation took another bizarre turn when we attempted to re-examine the black box. Upon opening the secure storage unit where it had been kept, technicians discovered the device had changed. The exterior, previously corroded and damaged, now appeared pristine, as if new. More impossibly, the manufacturer's serial number had changed to a sequence that, when translated from its alphanumeric code, spelled "Return him." Attempts to play back the recording again have failed. The device now emits only a single tone, at exactly the same frequency as the human voice's average resonance during states of extreme fear. Our team brought in Dr. Hannah Michaels, a linguistic anthropologist specializing in communication patterns across altered states of consciousness. After reviewing all available evidence, she proposed a theory that, while speculative, aligns with the observed phenomena. According to Dr. Michaels, the crash may have created what she terms a psychic echo chamber, where the intense emotional energy of the victims at the moment of death created an impression in the physical recording medium. Think of it like a form of quantum entanglement, but with consciousness instead of particles, she explained. If young Daniel somehow survived but remained unconsciously connected to those who died, he might have functioned as an anchor point between worlds. The black box could have served as both recorder and transmitter of this connection. When asked why this connection would manifest only now, 45 years later, Dr. Michaels suggested systems tend toward equilibrium. Perhaps whatever anomaly allowed the child to survive created an imbalance that needed to be corrected. The universe doesn't like loose ends. I would normally dismiss such concepts as pseudo-scientific speculation, but the evidence in this case consistently defies conventional explanation. Furthermore, 3 additional details have emerged that cannot be ignored. First, analysis of Mercer's DNA from a recent physical examination compared to a preserved blood sample from his childhood shows subtle but significant differences, particularly in regions associated with cellular aging. According to geneticist Dr. Sanjay Patel, the patterns indicate Mercer's biological aging processes were operating under different parameters than normal human physiology would dictate. Second, we've identified 7 other survivors of fatal air disasters over the past 50 years who, like Mercer, were children at the time of their incidents and grew up to work in aviation investigation. 3 of these individuals have also disappeared under mysterious circumstances after examining recovered flight recorders. Finally, and most disturbingly, when our team attempted to visit the crash site of Eastern Airlines Flight 217 last week, we encountered anomalous conditions. Despite clear weather forecasts, the area was enveloped in dense fog that seemed to arise from nowhere. Electronic equipment malfunctioned, compasses spun randomly, and multiple team members reported hearing what sounded like distant conversation and laughter coming from the densest part of the surrounding forest. The expedition was aborted when 2 team members became disoriented and nearly fell into a previously undocumented crevasse that, according to geological surveys conducted just 3 months earlier, should not exist. Before retreating, however, team leader Marcus Webb reported seeing what appeared to be a gathering of people standing motionless among the trees, observing our team. When he called out to them, they reportedly took a single synchronous step backward and vanished into the fog. Upon returning to the trailhead, the team discovered their vehicle's radio was malfunctioning, broadcasting only static with a rhythmic pattern. Audio specialists later confirmed this pattern precisely matched the cadence of a funeral march. The question that continues to haunt our investigation is not just what happened to Daniel Mercer, but what is happening to our understanding of reality itself. The boundaries between past, present, and future, between life and death, seem to have become permeable in ways our scientific frameworks cannot adequately explain. Perhaps most chilling is the possibility that this case represents not an isolated anomaly, but a pattern we failed to recognize. How many other impossible survivals might exist? How many other people walking among us should have died decades ago? And what does it mean for them when the circle finally completes? 2 months have now passed since Mercer's disappearance. Yesterday, we received an anonymous package at our headquarters containing a single item. A modern digital voice recorder with no identifiable manufacturer markings. When activated, it played only 15 seconds of audio. Daniel Mercer's voice, with background noise consistent with a mountain forest environment. The door swings both ways. I've brought them back with me this time. They're curious about you, Catherine, especially about how you'll sound when you realize what's happening. They particularly enjoy that moment of recognition. Listen carefully in empty rooms. Pay attention to the voices that speak just as you're falling asleep. We're coming to complete your circle next.
The recorder contained no electronic components. When our team disassembled it, the casing contained only a small piece of twisted metal, later identified as a fragment from the fuselage of Eastern Airlines Flight 217.
I've taken precautionary measures since receiving this message. I sleep with lights on. I've installed audio recording equipment throughout my home. I've arranged for continuous remote monitoring of my vital signs. But these practical steps do little to address the fundamental question this case has forced me to confront. What if death is not the end, but merely a transition to another state of being? And what if that state sometimes overlaps with our own? 3 nights ago, I woke at exactly 3:17 a.m. to find my recording equipment had activated automatically. The audio file contained what sound analysts have confirmed is my own voice, though I have no recollection of speaking. In the recording, I am apparently delivering remarks at what sounds like a formal occasion. The final words are clear. And so we welcome Catherine Chen to our company. The circle widens. The pattern grows.
The voices multiply. The metadata shows this recording was created on a date 3 weeks from now. I'm scheduled leave beginning tomorrow. I'm not certain what I hope to find in the Allegheny Mountains, but I know that's where answers await. Perhaps I'm following in Mercer's footsteps toward my own predetermined end. Perhaps I'm walking into an elaborate hoax or mass delusion. But the investigator in me cannot ignore the call to uncover truth, even when that truth may exist beyond the boundaries of what we consider possible. Before I depart, I'm sealing this report and all supporting evidence in a time-locked file that will be automatically released to select media outlets if I fail to return. The public deserves to know that our understanding of reality, of life and death themselves, may be far more fluid than we've been led to believe. To those who hear this account, I ask you to consider not just what you know to be true, but how you know it.
Consider the possibility that consciousness may not be bound by the physical constraints we've assumed. Consider that time may not flow in only one direction. Consider, most unsettlingly, that the voices you occasionally hear in moments of silence, those whispers you dismiss as imagination or the wind, may be attempts at communication from those caught between states of existence, those who died but never fully departed, those who, like Daniel Mercer, exist in a liminal space where past and future collapse into an eternal present. Since beginning this investigation, I've started hearing them too. Soft conversations that cease when I enter a room, my name spoken in my empty apartment, the sound of multiple recorders running simultaneously when I know I've activated only one. Last night, as I packed for my journey to the mountains, I heard a child's voice from my closet, clear as day. "We can't wait to meet you, Miss Chen. Mr.
Mercer says you ask all the right questions. What would you do if the dead began speaking to you through technology meant to record their final moments? Would you, like me, follow their voices into the unknown? Or would you close your ears to their call, knowing some knowledge comes at the ultimate price? If you're hearing this recording, it means I've already found my answers. The question now is whether you're prepared to seek your own. Because once you begin listening for the voices between stations, in the static of empty channels, in the background hiss of every recording, you'll never stop hearing them. And eventually, they'll know you're listening. They're patient. They have all the time in the world. But I'm getting ahead of myself. This investigation remains active. Officially, Daniel Mercer is simply missing. The recording is just a technical anomaly, and I'm taking a brief vacation to clear my head. That's what the official report will say when it's filed next week. Yet, even as I speak these words, I can hear something in the background of this very recording. Voices that shouldn't be there, commenting on words I haven't spoken yet, discussing how my voice will sound in my own eulogy. The black box doesn't just record. It connects, it preserves, it waits, and sometimes, if you listen closely enough, it brings back those who should have stayed among the dead. What would you do if you heard your own voice describing your death? Would you run from fate or embrace the inevitable? Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more investigations into aviation anomalies that challenge our understanding of reality itself, because some mysteries don't want to remain unsolved.
Some secrets follow you home.
And some recordings were never meant to be played, especially not those captured in the moment between life and death, in that eternal instant of freefall, when the mountains rush up to meet you, and everything you thought you knew about existence shatters against the unyielding truth of what waits on the other side. Listen carefully. They're speaking to you right now.